Since the dawn of time, man has been curious. And for almost as long, the Vibes Broadcast Network has sought the truth. Investigate, discuss, explore. Okay, maybe in other episodes, but this one is just listen to the vibes.
The views and opinions of our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the host or the Vibes Broadcast Network. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes, and I am very honored to have the one and only Mr. Jeffrey Weissman here, and we're going to get to know him and have a great conversation and hopefully get some inspiration for each of you to pursue the things in life that you want to do. So with no further ado, Mr. Jeffrey.
Get to know me.
Let's get to know you.
Hey, Kyle.
Happy
solstice.
Thank you. And Merry Christmas to you.
And may your new year be joyous and COVID-free.
Amen to that. So, like I said, we want to get to know you. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, okay. I was born at a very early age. It was, in fact, in the hospital just so I could be close to my mother. I'm an actor, a writer, a director, father. I don't know, but I have a lot of categories I could fill. I've produced things and events and productions. I try to entertain, enlighten, educate. I'm a coach, teacher, professor, taught at university.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So where'd you teach at?
I currently am, because of pandemic, teach virtually. I have actors that I coach really around the world. And in person, I was teaching at Sonoma State University. I've taught improvisation and comedy and Commedia dell'arte in studios, the Bay Area Professional Actors Studio, and at the San Francisco Acting Academy. Also, a while back, San Francisco School of Digital Filmmaking, headed up their acting department. I go to the High School of the Arts. I go to various schools now virtually and lecture. Often people, want me to, when they're studying Back to the Future, and talk to the students about that experience. I'll even go to film festivals and expos and do workshops. I'll get a handful of would-be performers and train them in improv and theater games for a couple hours, and then we'll do a show for friends and family.
I wanted to be an actor, but unfortunately they say you have to have talent first, so go figure.
You can do it. If some of the folk that I see doing it, you could just apply yourself. And it's like anything, really, though. It's a craft, and anyone who is serious about becoming either on stage, on television, or film, an actor, you have to study. You have to hone your craft, just like anything you do, whether it's in the arts or in practical vocations. Practical vocations. Notice I said that, because acting really isn't a practical vocation.
Right. I actually did a pilot for a reality show several years ago, and of course, getting to play myself, I still wasn't good enough. So, but
one of the big hiccups for would-be or first-time actors is self-criticism. And as soon as you start sort of being self-conscious or criticizing your own self, you're now disconnecting from the character or the material or the camera or your audience. And one of the key things is right now, and this is a free lesson, is you put your attention away from yourself and listen and be engaged. And when you remove that self-consciousness, your confidence kicks in, your connection and your real life and reactions kick in. You'll hear some acting coaches saying, acting is reacting, acting is listening, acting is being engaged.
Right. Well, I mean, quite honestly, I didn't want to really focus on myself here, but when we were doing the show, they wanted us to play like the serious, and all of us we joked around a lot, and that, so joking around was more who we were. And I told my buddy, who was actually the star of it, I told him, I said, this is not going to work, man. They're not letting us be us. And sure enough, A&E's like, nah, we don't want it, and moved on.
Yeah, it may be a director error there, in that if you're playing a bad guy or you're playing a serious situation, the bad guy isn't necessarily bad because he acts bad. A bad character generally doesn't think they are bad. They generally have the thought that what they're doing is right and just. When you create the situation and the stimulation to get an end result, that is generally what a director needs to do with an actor. Hopefully a director knows how to speak in actor terms. There's so many different acting techniques that I recommend would-be directors to get their foot in the water, get their toe in the water of as many different techniques as possible, whether it's Meisner with fantasy charging or repetition exercises, or Strasbergian actor studio method, sense memory, emotional recall, or if it's Suzuki or viewpoints, all these different acting techniques that I'm referring to, that if a director really takes themselves seriously, they'll expose themselves to the different shops and be able to speak in the actor terms. So when they're on set and they see an actor with a block, then they need to do to support that actor. And once again, if a director is trying to get you to an emotion, is result oriented, they're missing the mark. It's very, very difficult to get from point A to point B and say, hey, I need you to cry. I want you to do this on this line and blah, blah. Life doesn't, your responses come from the conditions, what's going on around, the stimulation that's going on around. So as an actor in rehearsal, you figure out what's going to work for you. Example, when I auditioned for Pale Rider, I knew I was going to have to cry on cue. And I had, like I mentioned, studied these different acting techniques, and I wasn't going to let anything to chance to do a Western with Clint Eastwood.
Right.
And when I went in, I had prepared fantasy charging, the Meisner technique of imagining, because I had to cry over my dead daddy's body. I imagined my own father's death and practiced fantasy, seeing my father's body there and crying over it. I also had, for a sense memory and a sort of a subjective personalization technique, I had a lock of my grandmother's hair in my pocket.
Oh, wow. And
she was really one of my family who encouraged me when I was little. I wanted to be an actor all my life. And she's the only one who encouraged me. My parents didn't want me to get into it, so on and so forth. And yet she said, darling, if that's what you want to do, don't let anyone tell you otherwise, and so I adored her and I loved her so dearly for that. And so I had her, in case I needed it, the lock of her hair in my pocket. And then I had also studied a very Zen approach where you just trust the material, where you keep the lines coming and keep the attention away from yourself and let the conditions of what's in the writing grab you and take, and live it. And that worked. I had tears, no problem.
Wow.
Put on tape for Clint by the producer on a Friday, I guess, and by Monday I was on an airplane heading to Idaho to shoot the film.
Man. Question about Pale Rider, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but what I read was that the original part, I guess you were supposed to get, you you ended up with a different part?
Like that. What had happened, my understanding was that Chris Penn, Sean's little brother, Chris was a great actor, was at a party, Malibu or somewhere, and saw Clint and said, "Hey, I want to work with you. I want to do a film." And Clint sent Chris the Pale Rider script and offered him the part of Eddie Conway. And Chris kind of threw it back at him and said, "No, I don't want to play a good guy. I want to play a bad guy." So Clint offered him LaHood, the son of LaHood Jr. What was his name? His character name escapes me. But so the part of Eddie was filled by the actor who was already cast as Teddy Conway. So Chuck LaFont went into Eddie's role, and now Teddy's was open. And my agent at the time was rather aggressive. She was calling around the studios on a regular basis every week. And when she called Warner Brothers, she said to the casting department over there, I don't know if it was Lauren Lloyd, Phyllis Huffman, or Marion Doherty, but anyway, what are you casting that hasn't come out in the breakdowns, which is how agents find out about what's casting. And they said, "Oh, well, we have this thing in this Clint film that we're going to cast from our own files. We're finding." She said, "Oh, well, describe it to me. Maybe I have a client." And she thought I fit the description and got me in. So it was a really nice bit of providence there. And Chris Penn saying, "I want to play bad guy."
Now, when you got into acting, how difficult was for you personally to get into acting?
I got into it right away. I think I started play acting as a child. My sister and I, we would act out the records that we started buying, when we were adolescents, Led Zeppelin or Black Sabbath or Moody Blues, or, we would kind of live lyrics and songs. Alice Cooper, we'd just like go in our bedrooms and play the records and act them out for each other. And we had always been playmates all our, baby and toddler years, and grew into continuing that. Really did a lot of fun playing, especially with dance. We danced a lot. And I knew I wanted to be an actor early on when I would go to my father's club. He managed and directed, and sometimes owned private clubs where there was bridge and backgammon being played. And there were often actors. Lauren Green was once one of his business partners. There were always actors at his clubs. And I remember my babysitter one night taking me to his club, and we met Omar Sharif. And she flipped out over that. And then right after that, we went to see him in a new movie that had just premiered that he was in. And there he was on the big screen. She flipped out again. And I thought that was kind of cool. Gosh, I want to do this. I want to impress my babysitter, who I really adored. And I must have been, 5 years old or 6 years old, something small. I remember also Chico Marx, the Marx Brothers' widow, kidnapping me at the club one day and hiding me under the table for a couple hours. Seeing all these older women's legs, their stockings. I remember this. I was little. I must have been 4 or 5 years old or something. But and my mom, she was a bail bondswoman. She'd bailed Lenny Bruce out of jail and various other celebrities. And my dad saw, these stars drinking and gambling at his club and swearing, and they didn't want me to go into that. In fact, he came home. My dad came home one day and said, "Jeffrey, you know who Get Smart is? Maxwell Smart?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, Don Adams, the actor, comedian, he was at the club today." And I just casually said, "Don, my kid wants to be an actor. What advice do you have for him?" And he said, "Wally, tell him to forget about it. It's 10% talent and 90% luck." And I had friends like Anissa Jones from Family Affair, Buffy, and Lisa Gerritsen from My World and Welcome to It. I had friends growing up who were working actors. And I always wanted to be, like Opie on Andy Griffith's show. I wanted to work. I wanted to play act and thought I could do television, film, but they insisted that I just stick to school, and they were all right with me doing shows in school. So first in class, besides being the class clown, I would start doing news reports, like on Saturday Night Live from ancient Egypt for my history project, or from ancient Rome or whatever, and just ham it up in class, which got lots of laughs, and I also got my studies in, so I was actually using whatever we were studying at the time in my reports. And then in junior high, started doing variety shows and plays, and that carried on through high school. And once I was out of high school, they couldn't tell me what to do, so I joined up with a company that would supply mostly background or people for group shots and films, and I started getting my foot on major studio lots. I worked on FM and The Rose, and I Want to Hold Your Hand, and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, where I got brainwashed by Alice Cooper. So that was in the late 70s, and I started realizing this background stuff, even though it was exciting and I was learning a lot what it was like to be on a movie set in a shoot, it was not fulfilling as an actor. Right. And I got advice from a wonderful artistic director to get training, and went after the American Conservatory Theater and University. And while at university, I fell into an opportunity to screen test for the lead in a motion picture. And that's how I got the hot agent that opened that door for Pale Writing.
Wow. Okay. If you don't mind, I want to ask you a little bit about parenting. Now, I'm assuming that, even though your parents probably didn't want you to be an actor, I'm sure they were still good parents. How much did you get from your parents that took you over into your own parenting?
A great deal. A great deal. My parents were children of a different age, having been raised on the back end of the Depression. My mother, being from Texas and had 5 siblings, they had a pretty rough time, obviously, and she was very adamant and strict about, being in bed by 8:30, all the way up through junior high. I think finally in 10th grade, I was allowed to go to bed at 9. But my older brother and sister, I watched them go through sort of the sexual revolution and the protests of teenagers, and the advent of the Beatles and rock and roll, and I saw them rebel, yeah. And my other sister, who was closer to my age, she rebelled pretty hardcore, and I did too. After I still wanted to. I love my parents very dearly. I wanted to play their game and respect them. But as soon as they went to bed after Johnny Carson's opening monologue, when I was in 10th or 11th grade, I'd get up and I'd sneak out and go to a friend's house and drink champagne all night and listen to music, and then sneak back in at 5 a.m. and get up to go to school. It was. I was in. I was not a good. I was a good son, but at the same time, I needed to respect my own needs, and I needed to get out and find my own way. And they were very strict and didn't really, I always had a curfew. Mm-hmm. I remember my friends were pretty heavy partiers, and at one point, I always had in my pockets all the schedules for all the buses, so I could get home exactly at the curfew time, just make it by 9 p.m., whenever it was. And I remember my friends sort of pinning me down once and taking all my bus schedules and burning them.
Oh, no.
Because I was always trying to look at it and make sure I could only party until 8:30, and then I got to get a bus to get home. Anyway. But my parents had a great deal of love and respect for each other. My father, even though I have a Jewish last name, he really wasn't raised. I don't think he was even bar mitzvahed. And my mother, who was raised Methodist, had converted to Catholicism. I think a nun teacher in her school talked her into it, and they really didn't want to influence the kids heavily in a religious way. They had more compassion for morals. They wanted you to be morally respectful, and I, as much as I can, bringing it through my youth and into my adulthood, try to have good graces. You know, opening a car door or helping someone down, usually a woman off a high step or something. You know, I always excuse myself when burping or farting. You know, it's I try to keep some semblance of grace, and though it's been so disconcerting to see sort of the evolution of a lot of people throwing that stuff out the window. It's interesting. So I think it's cyclical, and you know, we are in a hotbed of freedoms, and we're not going to get political here, so I'm pull back.
Yeah.
And my parents, though, I adored. My father wasn't, like I said, always available, since his club hours, he usually went to work in the late afternoon, didn't get home until 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. But when I did have him on weekends and all, we, you know, play tennis or baseball or softball or fish. He would love fishing. My mother worked hard too, and she was, though I have to say, the strong arm of the disciplinarian. So there was inevitable clashes of the generation. Like I mentioned, my older brother and sister between them, and then my other sister and I with them. And we did have fallout. I remember having a terrible fallout when I was 16 and just running away to the circus, actually the Renaissance Fair. I lived on the fair site for a while, and learned to find my way there. It was kind of a blessing in disguise, because it made me really realize how good I had it at home. And I, you know, eventually came back and finished my high school, and even got their support when I started acting. The first time they saw my name in the credits on Twilight Zone movie, they were thrilled. They were thrilled for me.
That had to have been tragic with Vic Moreau and everything that happened to him during that.
Yeah, that was very alarming to me when my agent called 3 months after that accident on the John Landis segment shoot. She said, "Yeah, you're going in to read for George Miller, who I adored. You know, I love Mad Max and Road Warrior, and this was his first Hollywood job." And when I realized it was Twilight Zone, I was like, "Well, that's bad taste. What? Why are they doing that?" And she said, "Well, Spielberg decided, because he had already a lot of the pieces of the puzzle in line for Joe Dante's episode and his own episode and George's episode, and the accident took place like on the last day of shooting on Landis's, that he wanted to finish the film." And I thought it was incredibly bad taste, but I really liked George Miller's work, and here was one of my first opportunities to get on a big movie as a co-star, and to work with John Lithgow, who I was a big fan of, and I became very close very quickly to Donna Dixon and Abby Lane and J.D. Johnston. You know, it was a real great ensemble cast.
Yeah.
And a thrill working on that set, because I love the nuts and bolts of making movies, and watching Alan Davio, our cinematographer, just get overjoyed at some of the stuff he was getting, and then George Miller being overjoyed. It was one of the first times they were able to tap the lens of the camera so they could do video playback, or they could see live monitor what the camera was seeing and not just the cinematographer. And I remember joy, just oodles of joy coming out of George Miller's ears, because he was like, "Oh, this is looking good. Oh, yes." You know, and then Garrett Brown, who invented the Steadicam. It was one of his early jobs, with this 65-pound pack on this big man running up and down the aisles of this fuselage of this airplane shooting us. And George was very generous in that he said, if I had a line or a bit of business I wanted to try it in rehearsal. And I came up with at least a half dozen different things that bits and pieces still show up in the film. And it was just thrilling watching John Lithgow work. He usually, being weaned pretty much on stage, is very big. And for film, like, I think he was best known at that time for The World According to Garp, which I believe he won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in it as the transvestite or transsexual character. And John, for film, is used to having directors tell him to bring it in and be smaller. Yet George on this was telling, no, bigger is better. It's great. And he loved that. And when I teach acting, I use Clint, Michael J. Fox, and John as some of my examples of actors who have found what works for them. Because John is big and he does everything, but he needs to be conscious of bringing it in for the camera because that's your audience. For Michael, Mike Fox is weaned on television sitcom stuff, which he has as second nature. He has this outside of himself director's eye that knows when the comedy is working or not. Michael is one of the only actors I've ever heard on a set call cut when he's not directing. And Zemeckis was okay with it because Michael said immediately after calling cut, he said, I didn't even believe that myself. And Zemeckis isn't going to argue with that. He trusts, and Michael's a star. With Clint, like that scene around the campfire, it took us all night to shoot that, him doing that monologue over and over and the camera panning of everyone's reactions and listening. And I kept looking over and I was like, he's not doing anything. It doesn't look like he's doing anything at all. And yet when it was up on the big screen, that 70 millimeter film, the 70-foot screen, it's full. And he's putting everything right at the end of his nose. And it was really delightful. And there were three very distinct different types of acting there. And watching their techniques close up was just a lovely gift for me.
And Back to the Future, I love all three movies. And I was kind of curious, when you stepped in part two, and you're taking over this part that Crispin Glover, of course, started, did that feel awkward, especially when them trying to make you look so much like him? I mean, it's like almost, I don't know. To me,
there were a lot of.
I don't know what your experience would be, but
the experience was totally mixed. The production came to me first to be a stand-in photo double.
Yeah.
And I even called Crispin and left him a message because we had worked together before he got the first film on a film at AFI. And I said, if you remember me, Crispin, please say a good word. I could use the work. My wife at the time was having our second kid. I could use my medical. And I met first with the ADs, who then told the director about me. And then they sent me to casting, and I read the scene where they're hanging, George and Marty are hanging the laundry in the backyard. And that went well. And then they started sending me to prosthetic fittings. And so I imagined they needed George in a couple places at the same time. I'm going to be a photo double, And like they did with Kevin Holloway was Michael's double when Mike's up on the scaffolding crawling while Kevin would be down playing the guitar on the stage, and vice versa, all that stuff. And then I did a screen test with the young George makeup. And I remember Dean Cundy telling Bob Zemeckis, when Zemeckis said, Dean, how's it look? And Dean saying, oh, I think we have Crispin without the trouble. At that moment, I was like, well, wait a minute, where's Crispin? And because they didn't really tell me jack. But in my mind, Crispin had another project that he couldn't get out of or rearrange the timing that he'd already committed to or something. I couldn't fathom how they were going to do the film without him. Be that as it may, I even told my agents, I think they're going to offer me the role. And then my makeup guy, Ken Chase, who designed all the makeups, he said, Crispin's out, you're going to be George. I said, how can they do that? That's, I guess, okay. So they've got his life mask and they're putting his young face on me to recreate the fight with Biff and the kiss with Lorraine at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance and all that stuff. So being Universal, and I had played Stan Laurel and Charlie Chaplin and Groucho Marx for Universal for 15 years. And they always paid the licensing to use those likenesses. So I figured they had paid Crispin for the licensing of his face and his makeups. Little did I know, because after part 3 came out, Crispin called me and said, you know, what they did is unfair. They made you up to look like me, and they cut it in close-ups of me with your work. And I said, and they didn't pay you? They didn't have that licensing agreement? He said, no, they're going to pay me reuse of those few shots, close-ups. They were going to pay me scale plus half or something. I said, oh man, you got screwed. And I helped him by showing him, you know, my makeup Polaroids and different shots and stories. And he, of course, you know, sued everyone. And they settled, I think, before it went to court, where he got $750,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
well, they should have known better. They also, you know, I kind of see all the sides on this. I have to, because I'm in the middle of it. I was the pawn being used by everyone. And Spielberg and Zemeckis and Gale and Canton and Marshall and anyway, they all kind of were stuck in a position where if they went to Crispin and asked his permission to use that makeup, he probably wouldn't have given it to him. Because my understanding, as things have come out, the last negotiations they had, my understanding is that he insisted on script approval. And I don't think they were going to let an actor approve of the script. Looking at his side, this is my Libra nature coming out. Looking at his side, his star was rising. You know, River's Edge and various other film roles that he had been doing at that time. He was really doing great work, and he continues to do great work. He's eccentric as hell, but he also is a good actor. So, you know, I can see why they butted heads. And Crispin told me stories how they made him cry on set in front of the extras. Bob Gale did that to him, and they had creative differences. He and Leah had created a painting together in character. They spent many hours, and as you know, another 7 weeks shooting with Eric Stoltz before Mike came on, working on the characters. And they had done a painting together in rehearsal, and Crispin came in with the painting and said to Bob Zemeckis, I want this to be in the McFly home. And Zemeckis flatly turned him down and said, I got an art director, you know, you can't do, no. And that pissed him off. And then Ken Chase, when Crispin fell asleep in his makeup chair, Ken Chase silently snipped some of his hair that was bothering Ken for application of his makeup or whatever. And Crispin heard it or woke up and flipped out. You know,
I would too.
Yeah, well, anyway, there's a lot, there was a lot of stories on both sides, and it's a controversy that I think should die.
Yeah.
It died and has been a dead horse that's been beaten for more than 30 years. And what I think would be good for the fans is if everyone kind of let it go and came together for, say, Michael's charity, or for the thrill that the fans would have to see everyone do a reunion. But you know, egos were hurt and feelings were hurt, and it's too bad. It's sad. It's saddening and maddening. And you see a lot of these exploitive, what do you call things like TMZ and
those tabloid
stuff. They're also, the internet's full of them, and you'll see a lot of them drum up bits and pieces of controversial interviews. There's one interview that I did in the early 90s where I had mentioned that when I was in the Young George makeup, I was referred to as Crispin. And I remember seeing Leah with her mom up on the Universal tour when I was still up there playing characters. And she introduced me to her mother as the actor who played Crispin. Well, because I said that in an interview, that was taken out of context in these tabloids as if Leah sinned. And, you know, I'm friends with Leah. and there's nothing, yet people still say, oh yeah, no, he doesn't like Leah. I'm like, get over this, please.
She was making a joke and people took it serious. That's why I told you I don't
think it
believe
was she
everything.
couldn't remember my name at the moment. I don't think she could remember my name. Instead of introducing me as Jeffrey Weissman, she said, "This is the actor who played Crispin." And my ego got hurt.
Oh.
And I was interviewed like right after it happened, so I mentioned it in the interview, and it was like, well, I probably shouldn't have said that, but it also is being, rehashed 30 years later, and it's like, get over it.
Yeah, that's why I told you when I read that on the internet, like, I don't always believe everything that I read on there. There's got to be another side of that story. And
yeah, there's a lot of things that are manipulated by whatever powers might be part of them. A gentleman who wrote a book, a complete trilogy, paperback, Gaines, Cassine, who I helped introduce to many of the players, both behind the camera and in front of the camera. On my chapter, he let Bob Gale kind of edit my chapter, and he culled a lot of things from old interviews on the internet. So it's a misinformed chapter. And I wrote him. I said, Cassine, why did you do that? Why'd you let Bob, first of all, contradict the things I said, and then also take some of this old information that really isn't the whole story? He said, oh, I thought I did you justice. And I was like, oh dear. Anyway, it can't, I could be a control freak and make myself crazy over it, which I do sometimes, but I have to let it go and just move on. And I hope, people just do what a good majority of the fans out there do, and that's embrace this wonderful trilogy. It's become now a phenomenon. It's made over $1 billion, I think, worldwide, and it's one of the top 10 trilogies of all time.
Well, I've heard that they want to remake it, but I'm like, this is one of those movies you just don't reboot. I'm sorry, just leave it like it is. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm tired of.
I agree that Zemeckis and Gale have adamantly said no, they won't remake. There won't be a part 4. Blah blah blah. And I got into it with Tim Russ, one of the captains from Star Trek fame, and he said, nah, Universal owns it. If Universal wants to make the money and wants to redo it, they'll do it in spite of those guys. And I was like, I don't think so, Tim. Put them up. But it's what it is Hollywood. If they, I guess, get enough money and people let it, don't care. I don't think while the Bobs are alive that'll happen.
Yeah, I mean, we had that discussion earlier today. Actually, there's just some movies you don't remake. You wouldn't remake Casablanca. You wouldn't remake The Wizard of Oz. As it be.
Though they've tried.
They've tried, but I mean, you just can't. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe other people like the try to remake of Wizard of Oz, but I just think that's one of those movies you don't touch. When
I first was attached to the Back to the Future fan club, they used to put out a newsletter, a real print newsletter called the Hill Valley Telegraph. And in it, the fans would share their ideas for part 4. And there were some very creative ideas for Back to the Future part 4. And I'm sure Gale and Zemeckis have been inundated with them. And I not that long ago got out my script Paradox, which was part 2 and part 3 it was in the same script originally. And example, the scenes that I'm in 2015 in the McFly household, for rewrites, they use different colors of paper. Right. And for that scene in particular, there were probably 8 different colors for that scene, because I think they were rewriting constantly, not knowing if they had Crispin or not. In one of the versions, they had Marty hanging upside down in the ortholev. They didn't know what they were doing. And there's been talk that the ortholev thing was meant in case they didn't have Crispin to obscure if it was a different actor. And I'm not sure how truthful that is. There may be truth in that, but I think the main reason, my understanding, was that Crispin often wouldn't hit his marks for camera focus. And by having him hung upside down, they could control his movements and have him hit his marks remotely.
That's something. Do you ever have those diehard fans that come up to you and try to like nitpick every single solitary scene and, well, how is this possible? Or, what about
I think
this?
the question is how many?
How many? I could just imagine. I'm just like Star Trek.
Well, part of my it's part of my career, and I'm often invited to fan cons and film festivals and expos, and like when Facebook started, I reached I think 6,500 friends on Facebook like that. And one morning I woke up and I was down to 5,000 friends. I said, what happened to 1,500 of my friends? And Facebook all of a sudden put a 5,000 limit on your Facebook personal page. And I was like, oh, great. So, and a lot of those fans have become friends. And I have, of course, followers now. I probably have 4,000 followers on top of my 5,000 friends. And then about another 700 in line to be friends. And I have to find what accounts are inactive to release that so I can add another one, or especially to add someone I actually know. It's a bit of a nightmare. Thank you, Facebook. And I think that's probably why Twitter and Instagram are more favored for celebrities. A lot of, I know celebrities that I was friends with, their Facebook accounts have been pulled. They had to deactivate them because they were in conflict with the contracts that they had with their agents. A lot of big stars have to go through their agents or publicists or publicity departments at those agencies for releases and information and all. And there's NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, so on and so forth. So you'll see more fan pages than actual personal pages for big stars.
When it comes to social media, and this just popped into my head, but do you feel like you have to walk like on glass when it comes to that? Like if you make that one mistake, all of a sudden you're canceled from everything?
Somewhat. I'm pretty self-conscious at times about that. And if I'm emotional, I try not to get on there. There's also, like you say, OCD fans all have very opinionated. Some may have issues. I know the first Reddit Ask Me Anything I ever did, I had maybe 10% were radical Crispin Glover fans who, called me all sorts of names. And I get it. I understand. I was a fan, and I was shocked that it didn't work out for him. But then again, he made that choice. So yeah, damn it. Where's my foot? I'm going to shoot it. I though really love people. I'm a very social guy, and I love traveling and meeting folk. I have an international following. When I go to other countries, I have a huge following in Japan and a huge following in the UK and everywhere now, in Russia and Poland and Sweden. Anyway, I really have a good time when I'm doing the presentations. Like I can show you like a slideshow that I show at my panel.
Yeah, please. I'd love for you to share that with us. All
right, give me a check.
Sure. And we were talking about technology and social media and all that. There was a time when, like, if you had an argument with your wife and you took a drive and you'd be gone for X amount of time and she couldn't get to you right away, you would have that time to cool down, as to where now people get into the crazy texting and then they say things they don't really mean or they didn't think about.
Oh, you know my wife?
And that's the way I feel about social media too. I mean, you go on a rant. And
this was from junior high, doing Bligh Spirit. This is when I was up for doing the role of David in War Games. when Martin Brest was the original director, who told the agent that I was his favorite for that role.
Oh, wow.
MGM with my big hair, circa 1981. There with Marty Brest.
Oh, wow.
Who went on to direct Beverly Hills Cop and many other great films. I'm back here next to Donna with John being subdued there on Twilight Zone movie.
God, I had such a crush on her.
1982. So did I. They were with Charles and John. There's something there's a camera.
So that's one of those remake that I could say that I actually enjoyed, because I remember the William Shatner original.
It was superior to the William Shatner. I still love the William Shatner one, but but Lithgow and George Miller, really great combination. This was a little bit support work I did in Johnny Dangerously with Michael Keaton and a great cast. And then watching Daddy get shot in Pale Rider. First, he's got to find that gold.
All right. I can watch those movies over and over and over again.
Oh, if you look here, you see this shot. There's speckles on the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're in a blizzard. This was the second day of the shoot.
Oh, no way.
And the first day of the shoot was in sunshine when there's snow on the ground. The second day of the shoot, we had blizzard flurries. And then the third day, it took us 3 days to shoot that one scene. When we get over to Daddy's body, we're back in sunlight, but all the snow had melted. So they had to bring in the artificial base, oil-based snow.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at it, slow it down, you'll see the editor did a genius job cutting between the 3 days.
Wow.
You hardly notice.
How cold were you during that?
Freezing. With the wind chill factor, it rarely was above 10 below.
Was that Screech?
That is Dustin, yeah. I played his guru on Saved by the Bell. I was the high geek.
Oh, wow.
God rest Dustin.
Yeah.
And this was getting into makeup there. We had top-notch makeup artists. That was Mike Mills, who was the foreman on Beetlejuice and many other films. Worked with Zoltan and his wife, who got the Academy Award for Mask, and Marvin Westmore, and Kenny Myers, and Nancy Vasta. A lot of fantastic. Sonny Berman, who just passed away a year ago. This is how I would take breaks. It would take, first of all, 4 hours just to apply the makeups, and then hanging upside down, sometimes 19, 21. 1 week, I had 19, a 21, and a 26-hour long day.
Wow.
They didn't like getting me down because it took too long. So the guys from ILM built this little contraption so I could do a sit-up. They'd put it under me and say, okay, just rest there, we'll be back. And then everyone would go off for coffee, leave me on the set.
I'd say unless you just absolutely overanalyzed it, it's kind of hard to distinguish between y'all. That makeup is incredible.
This was from the cut rotating for pizza. You see, I'm in that body cast that would rotate me. George actually got to rotate up for his pizza when it came out of the hydrator. I've had a lot of wonderful fans create artwork too for me. There was never a commercial action figure of George from part 2, but a fan actually 3D printed one.
Oh, wow.
This is from the deleted Fruit Please banana scene where I tried to eat a piece of banana upside down. Kept slapping, the peel kept slapping me in the face. And then the young George controversial makeup. It was really great working with Tom. He's a really great guy, real pro, as Leah is as well.
Yeah, that's another series of movies I can watch over and over and over again.
So here's something to look at. You see here, we are recreating the backstage scene with Mike.
Mm-hmm.
And this next shot, which is from the same scene, that's not Mike.
No.
That's Kevin, his photo double.
God, from that angle, it looks just like him.
Right. And so Mike's outside, being knocked out by the door.
Right.
There from part 2. The Magic of Hollywood. And this is from part 3.
Yeah, Wendy
Having
was
her
another
fight-
one of those that died early.
Oh, Wendy Jo? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
God bless her. She was a delight. And like I said, there's these reunions where I've been kind of discovered out of obscurity by the fans. The DeLorean owners have brought me into their conventions and shows. And then the Hollywood show in '08, we have a lot of the cast members and crew here. And Michael came unannounced.
Wow.
My boy. And then I do other work. I, for fun, will be Lobster Man, or, I mentioned I played Charlie Chaplin and Groucho Marx and Stan Laurel. I did a Diagnosis Murder with Dick Van Dyke, and he was good friends with Stan Laurel. So this is us doing our Laurel impression.
God, I love him too.
And that's me as Stan Laurel.
Oh, wow.
That was early on in my Laurel with Spielberg there,
That's incredible.
more recent. And then there's Charlie. And then I put a Three Stooges team together, playing Larry. Hey, we do a lot of charities and events as we can. Even Iggy Pop's 60th
Oh
birthday
my
party, since his
gosh.
band was called the Stooges.
Yes.
And I-
Wow, that's good.
Bruce Groucho. And this is from a film I did called Corked, where I play an OCD winemaker. And this one is from a PBS movie called Dreamland, Mark Twain in Jerusalem. And I went to Israel to shoot as Twain on his trip, recreating his trip from 1867 to Europe and the Holy Land on the first commercial cruise line. And in recent years, I've continued playing Twain. And I'm currently developing an educational program, Mark Twain's American History. There's a Commedia dell'arte character, Puccinella, that I play, and a fool that I've played at Renaissance fairs and elsewhere, and with my boys when they were young. And just a lot of different character stuff here.
I would love to ask your kids, what was it like growing up with your dad?
They'd say, he's a clown.
Literally.
Well, that was from a film where I played a character who likes dressing as a clown, but who actually wasn't a clown. So playing it straight was really a challenge. This was from a few years ago. I played Igor in the musical version of Young Frankenstein.
Another awesome movie.
And when I was 14, I actually met Marty Feldman on the set of Young Frankenstein when they were shooting Putting on the Ritz.
That's one of my favorite scenes.
I was the hobo on the Polar Express for the California Railroad Museum for 11 years. And this is from a movie, a very heavy drama called Savior of None. And this is from one called The Traveler, where I play a character that can travel at will through time. And then some of the fan reunions, that's Harry Waters Jr. and me playing guitar and backup for him. We're going back, a lot of fundraisers for the Parkinson's Foundation. I even put together a cruise to raise money for Parkinson's during the anniversary year in 2015. We raised some good money for them. And I put a band together called Mr. Fusion that had all cast members from that future movies playing.
Man. So are you and Michael still pretty close?
The last time I saw Mike was in 2015. And we hung out backstage at the London Film and Comic Con. It was really great to see him. The first time I'm seeing him since we shot the films was 2008. And it was hard for all of us, Leah and Chris and Francis, Mark, Claudia, and myself. We spent about half an hour with Mike before going out and seeing the public. And it was the first time I think all of us had seen the effects of the Parkinson's on him. And it drives, back then it was driving him. You'd have to move sort of involuntarily. It was before, I think, a lot of the treatments that he has helped with his foundation perfect. And And it was really rough. It was, I think, rougher actually back then than now. He seems to be almost calmer now. And whatever he's doing, the medications or therapies have been working wonders. And it's really great. I know he is reluctant to travel long distances, and I think his work is limited now, but he's got a great legacy of work and is beloved by everyone. Yeah. Here's that action figure.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Brad Fife, uber fan, super fan, made it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, of course, know Michael Fox personally, and you do, but I mean, the things that I've seen from him, he seems like such a nice guy, and
yes,
of course, it's tragic for it to happen to anybody, but it's just hard to fathom someone like him getting something like Parkinson's.
It is heartbreaking, but at the same time, he is, like you said, a very nice guy, and he's feisty. He's a fighter, and he's funny and dynamic, and that hasn't changed.
Well, it seems like he's strong about it. So,
and he's writing books and doing book tours, and he's got a beautiful family, and he's raised $1 billion now.
Wow!
Towards finding a cure for Parkinson's.
Man, okay. Another thing about being a father, I know I'm going back to this again, but what do you encourage in your boys as far as what they are doing in life, and anything that you might do differently?
Well, I encourage them to be compassionate, to be smart. I said they could go into showbiz if they wanted, but I think they saw how hard it has been for me to make a living. And luckily they have not, although they both have acted. They both have done some film. In fact, Spencer, the youngest, was in a film that took a lot of awards. But the youngest is in human resources, and he's a really compassionate interviewer and support for his employees and in the company he works for. And the oldest one is working in the medical field. He's studying to be a radiologist. And their mother and their stepmother and I all have been really supportive and very loving, and that they're carrying that through with now their relationships. One is already married, and they're just an adorable couple, and the other one's just gotten engaged, and they have wonderful relationships with those gals. And they've all, gone through their trials and tribulations in life. Life, of course, isn't easy for any of us, and yet they've kept coming back to their core, which is big hearts and treating people with respect and common sense.
Well,
and trusting clients.
How difficult is it to actually be a good parent or spouse when you're in that kind of life?
As an actor, it's incredibly hard. I, in fact, was very blessed. The entertaining at the theme park work was a way that I could still flex my creative muscle, performing muscle, and yet have a weekly paycheck. Because raising a family as an actor that works infrequently, some years I'd have a commercial or two, some years I'd have guest star roles in a film role, but that is very hard to keep food on the table. Because I'll give you a statistic. Out of the, I don't know, probably 150,000 members of the Screen Actors Guild, and my numbers are not going to be very accurate because this is an old stat, but I believe less than 10% of them were making more than $10,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
So that gives you an idea that it's not a profession that you can really raise a family on unless you're a big star. And the actors that I've mentored that have proven successful have like blinders on. They have this sharp focus, and they're very rare to be distracted. They're always working on themselves. They're always working to create a team of support. Often it's family members. And also they are always looking for vehicles to create vehicles for themselves. They don't necessarily wait for Hollywood to come knocking, but are rather always developing something for themselves, which is a great way to crack that hard shell of Hollywood.
Yeah.
A hard nut to crack.
I mean, I can't imagine. I wouldn't have any idea. Myself, there was so many things that I wanted to do in life, one of which I wanted to be an artist really bad. And then I got married at a young age, had children pretty young, and was pressured by family to, get that 9 to 5 and steady job. And so I worked in public works for most of my life and got sidelined by a disability. But, here it is, I'm in my 50s and I'm just now doing the things that I really want to do in life.
You return to your art?
I still will paint and draw every once in a while, but
Great.
I've been so focused on the show and trying to bring some positivity to folks. And really, when I say a lot of these things, I'm not trying to, brag on myself or, make anybody feel sorry for me or anything. It's just, you know what? I can relate to some of you. You've probably been through the same things I have. I suggest if you haven't started working on something that you really want to do in life, do it now. Don't wait. Don't wait until, you're an older person. But you can also be like me, 50s, 60s, whatever, and you finally get that umph, go for it. You can't live in the past. You can't go back. Start on it right now. So one of the things I like to ask people that come on my show is, what advice would you give somebody that might help them to go for it?
Well, follow your muse, definitely. If it's in your soul, if you have to do it, you have to do it. And if you're not able to because of commitments and responsibilities, and you have to put food on the table and pay the rent, okay. I tell my students, if you can get a vocation in anything else that's practical to make a living at, do that first. Put money aside so when you decide, you've got enough of a nest egg to give it a year or two to go to Hollywood if that's your goal, or New York, or if Broadway's your goal. And once again, create your own projects if you can, so you have a calling card. It's so easy now to find filmmakers who want to work, and if you have something that would be a good vehicle for yourself. I've had numerous students or talent that I've nurtured or mentored do just that. One young man started writing me when he was 13, and I started giving him advice. By the time he was 16, he and I were co-starring in a short together. That became a calling card. The next year, he was in Hollywood working as Bootsy Collin in the James Brown biopic at Universal. He was just a go-getter. I've known actresses doing the same thing, and they had focused what they wanted to do. One actress wanted to be a scream queen. Now when I met her probably 8 years ago, maybe more now, she was just brand new to Hollywood, and she was very clear. By the end of the year, I want to have 3 roles or maybe 6 roles in horror films, and I want to be directing one by this time next year. And she did. They had clear goals, and if you can, always make friends with pros that you work with along the way. Keep a journal to keep your business connections and references. Keep another journal for your creative and developing your projects and your characters. Mm. And once again, don't be afraid to ask for help. If people say no, they generally will be nice about it and say, maybe another time, or, right. Try to keep doors open, especially with the pros. Mm. Or those that you see that have a good work ethic.
Yeah. That brings me to another point. Did you ever feel there was a point where you had to kind of disconnect from certain people in your life in order to become successful?
Sure. Yeah, we all have, probably you would call them vampires, either emotionally or distractions. I have grew up with some pretty bad boys and girls, who like to party a lot, and that didn't really serve me so well. I mean, I love having a place to vent when I was frustrated by the rules that I didn't want to abide by. But for someone like who's in the arts, especially in the performing arts, if you're an actor or a dancer, a singer, your body, your mind, your talent is your paintbrush. You are the tool, and you have to keep it clean and ready to work. And if you're stressed, which partying often will do, or emotional drainage, if someone's coming with their baggage, if someone is neurotic and don't know it, but you can sense it, that they're needy all the time or draining all your energy, you got to respect yourself and put your foot down and say, listen, I can't take it. I need to. And if it becomes someone that you're intimately involved with, it's a very hard thing to get out of, but you got to do it if you need to be stress-free. You need to be stress-free. One of the key things for acting is being relaxed. You have to be relaxed so you can do your task, which is allow the character to move in and for you to tell the story that needs to be told. You can't do that when you're tense and guarded and self-conscious and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah. So what have you got planned for the future?
Oh, I think I'll have lunch.
Well, it's almost supper time, man.
Oh, yeah. I'm a few hours behind you. I've just been asked to record an audio book for a dear friend of mine who wrote a great book about Hollywood in Monterey, and I'm looking forward to that project. I've got a friend, a director, writer who's interested in having me play this wonderful character who's the ruler of the universe in a pilot for a TV series. Working on that, knock on wood, that comes through. I just wrapped, I'm actually kind of a mess right now because I'm in repair from 3 weeks of performance in a Victorian themed festival, the Charles Dickens Christmas Fair, in which I was for 8 hours the MC at a stage and entertaining in between acts. And it was really great to do that again. We did a drive-through version of it. Usually it's a big full-blown 1,000 performer event. And this was just an abbreviated version of it because we kept our guests in their cars driving through Victorian London.
Oh, wow.
So I try to stay busy. I also have a few conventions that hopefully this new version of COVID isn't going to pull the plug on. One in North Italy, another one in New Jersey. So, knock on wood, I'll be able to get out there and meet the fans who are vaccinated. You could ask me the same question in a week and I probably have new answers for you because things come, I never know what's next.
Yeah, I understand that. Well, you get out here to Texas, man, I'll have to come out and see you then.
Yeah. Oh, and also, like I said, I'm developing a series. So I'm trying to do something sustainable that I can do myself in case lockdown continues with a new spread of this new variant, where I'm playing Mark Twain in a multi-episodic American history. It's Twain being on one side of a controversy and usually going to the other side through either life experience or being hit on the head by his wife or a relative, or and it's all based on his writings. I have a bibliography now. I've got about 36 books that I'm drawing from writing the scripts.
So it's not really a documentary per se or a biography. It's more of a based on.
Yeah, it's more of a based on, and it's kind of writing itself. It's really delicious. He was really not quite a feminist. He wasn't all for women having the right to vote early on. And then his wife kind of beat him over the head. She was raised in a very progressive family, and her family was friends with suffragists. And so he became then more pro women's rights. The same thing with abolitionists. His uncle had slaves on his farm, and he grew up in rural Hannibal, Missouri, where he saw slaves and didn't think twice about it until, he joined the Civil War on the Confederacy. And after a couple of weeks, he and his buddies came across a dead soldier, and they went AWOL. And when he was actually a ferry riverboat captain, he saw how sad the slaves were that were on his ship. And then later on, a lady named Aunt Rachel, they call her, told the story of her family being torn from her. And it made his entire family cry. And he became a huge pro-abolitionist. Same thing with the imperialist movement. He became an anti-imperialist because when he traveled the globe, he saw how the empire that the sun never sets on, the English Empire, the British Empire, abused the natives in East India and Australia and various other countries. And he really struck out when the United States, without provocation, attacked the Philippines and Puerto Rico and Cuba and all this. So there's a lot of rich stories how he was on one side of controversy and came to be generally on the right side of a controversy. Animal rights he became an advocate for animal rights. And a lot of it is through both his stories that he wrote and also through his life experiences and biographies.
And see, that's kind of stuff they should be teaching more in school, I think.
My goal is to have it as an educational tool.
That'd be wonderful. I'm going to leave it there. If people want to be able to follow you, how do they do so?
Don't follow me. I'll call a cop. So I'm on Twitter at JEF, just one F, Weissman, WEISSMAN. There, it's on the screen, but only one F, at Jeff Weissman on Twitter. On Instagram, it's at Jeffrey J. Weissman. On Facebook, my fan page is at Jeffrey Weissman Actor. Remember, the personal page is all full up.
You're all full.
All full up.
Every time I hit 5,000, they end up taking a few away. So I'm like, I give up. I'm not even going to try anymore.
Well, thanks for having me on, Kyle. It was a treat. And let me know when it's being posted so I can share on my social networks.
Sure. Now, do you have like a website or something? Or
that. Yeah, it kind of needs to be rebuilt, but it's still working. JeffreyWeissman.com, and on the homepage is a way to email me if someone wants to buy an autographed picture from Pale Rider or Back to the Future or Mark Twain or whatever.
Oh, awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on. This really means a lot.
My pleasure.
And well, I guess until the next one, everyone, I want to thank everybody. If you've come by for the first time, I hope you'll come back. And if you're regular to the channel, I really, really appreciate your support. And until the next one, everyone, please take care. God bless and peace.
I'll see you in the future.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network